Welcome to the World of Eora, a news and lore podcast about Pillars of Eternity and Avowed. I'm your host, Eric, aka Gingerino. Thank you so much for joining me as we dive into the history, lore, and game mechanics for the worlds that Obsidian has created for us. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the World of Eora. I'm your host Eric, aka Gingerino. Thanks everyone for joining me on another episode as we dive into history, lore, and game mechanics for Pillars of Eternity 1, 2, and Avowed. For anyone curious why we're pairing all those games together, it's because they share the same fantasy setting known as Eora. And so as the theory goes, if we dive into these games, we can glean some insights and understandings about the world and just have an appreciation for the nuance of the writing and perhaps facilitate different roleplay within the games themselves or at tabletop role-playing games, or just appreciate the lore of and the world building that Obsidian has made for us in those games. If you're new to the show, welcome to the show. Really happy to have you here, whether you've come from Pillars of Eternity and you're just looking into the lore, or you've come from Avowed and you're just looking into the lore. Welcome to the show. Really happy to have everyone here. If you're new, please send me an email. Let me know what you think of the episode, if you have any questions or topics that you would like covered, or just want to strike up a conversation about this geeky fantasy stuff. I'll also signpost you towards episode 0, where I signpost you further to more foundational episodes, like how magic works in this world, how the gods are, what their names are, different races, etc., etc. Though today will be a perfectly fine episode to start off with as well. Now, before we get started, I do want to apologize ahead of time. I was sick last week, and I'm still kind of recovering from a cold, so my voice might be a little off now and then, but I'm going to push through and work with it. I'm not hurt or anything. Everything's fine. I'm just, you know what it is, stuffed nose, sore throat, that whole kind of thing. So apologies if that comes across a lot throughout the recording. But today's episode, we're going to be talking about monks, and specifically, we're going to be talking about an order of monks known as the Thousand Dreams. This was a monk order that I was reading about actually in preparation for last episode, and I was really intrigued by the Thousand Dreams, and so I found myself wanting to talk about it and explore the idea a little bit further, and so we're going to be doing an episode on it today. And as well, since, again, I do have a cold, I'm going to try to keep this episode a little shorter, so kind of having this one topic with only a limited amount of lore perhaps will be a good, in between, a good halfway point. But watch me ramble for an hour. We'll see how this goes. As far as news goes, if you had watched the New Game Plus showcase, or the live stream for the New Game Plus showcase, then you will have seen some stuff from Obsidian, most notably for Avowed and Grounded 2. Now, we're not going to talk about Grounded 2 here, even though I love that game and it's developed by Obsidian. We're just talking about Avowed. I don't know that we learned a ton of new things, but it was really cool to see some interesting gameplay. As well, there was an announcement about Avowed and other platforms it's coming to. Yes, congratulations those of you on the Sony platform who've been looking forward to playing Avowed. You now are going to get the chance to do that. When the anniversary update drops, there's going to be an anniversary edition, I guess. Well, maybe there won't be an edition, but basically the game is going to release on the PlayStation 5 platform. Which, honestly, that's great. I know there's a lot of talk about whether or not this is good for Microsoft or Xbox or people who signed on to Xbox. But you know what? If more people get to play this game, that's pretty cool. We're not going to talk about the ins and outs of that political thing. I get it as someone who has invested a lot of time and money into the Xbox platform. There is a sense of what's that? Where's the honoring of that purchase or investment? But at the end of the day, I know a lot of people that only have PlayStation who wanted to play Avowed, and they didn't really have a chance, and they didn't want to play it on mobile through the cloud. So this lets them have that chance, and I have more friends now that I can talk to about this world, a year after it released. Aside from that, we got to see some video clips of the quarterstaff and its play in action in the middle of combat. It had a really interesting, what looked to be stun attack, where it slammed to the ground and shot out magical magical missiles or something out at the character that they were trying to harm. And so it does seem like there might be a more magical bend to the quarterstaff than I was originally thinking. I have kind of envisioned it when they first announced it that it was basically just going to be a big bonking stick that made you look like a wizard, but it wasn't going to do any wizard functions. And perhaps I'm wrong about that. Maybe it will actually have some sort of included magical attachments or variation to it. I don't know. I suppose we'll find out when it comes out. Looking forward to running a new character with this quarterstaff and checking out any of the new things that are related to Avowed. As far as Pillars of Eternity goes, there is obviously still the beta testing and all that for turn-based mode in Pillars of Eternity 1, for those of you who are turn-based mode freaks. Which again, like more people playing the game is good. There's a lot of people out there who they do not like real time with pause, and they won't play the game unless it's turn-based. So the fact that there's going to be an option is good. I hope that it is done well, because this game was designed with real time and pause, and so to really get a good balance of how the game should run in turn-based mode, it's going to take some work. And I know they did it for Deadfire, and that was basically just some people at Obsidian who took the initiative to do that, and that's awesome. I hope that this really honors the turn-based mode crowd. I myself, I like real-time with pause, but I have loved many a turn-based games and will continue to play them. But yeah, if you want to learn more, you want to see it for yourself, go and check out the full dev interview on New Game Plus Showcase. You can go find that on YouTube pretty easily by just searching those terms. With that said, let's go on to the lore.
Half the locals would arrest you for trespassing and the rest would kill you outright. I'm curious. What exactly did you find there?
So this lore comes from the item description of a weapon called Purgatory. As you may know, in the game of Pillars of Eternity and Avowed, as well as many other RPGs, if you look at item descriptions in a lot of games, you'll get a brief description about what a weapon is. A quarterstaff. It's a long stick that you bonk people in the head with. But in a lot of RPGs, if you look at the item description, especially for unique items and weapons or armor, it will have some sort of lore or flavor or a story within the world. This is seen throughout a lot of other games. I saw it a lot in Destiny, and it's how we placed the lore together, what was going on in that game. Dark Souls is particularly known for hiding its story within the item descriptions, and that's where you get a lot of the lore and the world building from. And in Pillars of Eternity and Avowed, that's no different. Now, the story, I think, is a little more obvious when you're playing the game, but there's a lot more that you can glean from reading item descriptions. Such as the monk order we're discussing today called the Thousand Dreams, where if you don't read item descriptions, you probably will never really hear about this, except in one particular case, outside of this item description. Now, before I dive into the Thousand Dreams monk order themselves, I'd like to do a quick overview on monks themselves within the game. For those who are interested in hearing more in depth about what a monk is, I have done episodes on monks and building a monk character in the game of Avowed or in the game of Pillars of Eternity. I really love the lore associated with monks. I think they're a very unique take on the monk class that we see in a lot of fantasy media and video games and tabletop games. And I personally would really love to play one. And Zawa, the companion from the first Pillars of Eternity game, who is a monk character, is easily one of my favorite characters in the entire game. I like humor in a lot of the companions I have, and Zawa fits that bill 100%. So for those who may not know about it, I'll give a little overview here. Monks are a class that you can play in Pillars of Eternity 1 or 2. You can also build a monk character in the game of Avowed through the ability trees that are offered there, but you aren't necessarily a monk. You won't have dialogue choices for being a monk. You can kind of just roleplay as one. Monks are really classified and flavored by mortification and wounds. In this world, monks are typically people that engage with pain as a way to embolden the soul that they have and use that energy from that emboldening to perform superhuman abilities or feats. As we play Pillars of Eternity especially, we see this where any character, whether they're a fighter or a cipher or a monk or a paladin, they are somehow performing abilities that seem superhuman. Even fighters being able to quickly pull someone from within the other side of the battlefield to themselves, or how they even just have the ability to withstand that much damage in battle. It seems almost superhuman to the point where there's obviously some magic going on. And monks are the same way. They have a lot of speed. They move very quickly. They can cross the battlefield in a moment's notice. They can lay out 1,000 punches in half a second. I might be exaggerating a little bit there. They can also like project other images of themselves. There's a whole bunch of really cool abilities that monks come with. And whenever you're dealing with stuff like this in the world of Eora, the question that you're kind of asking in terms of how they do this has to do with the way that the person is interacting with something known as essence. Essence, for those unaware, is, in short, the stuff that souls are made of. But essence goes beyond just the soul that you or I might have in this world. Essence is also suffused into any living thing, like rocks and trees and dirt, and it's also found in the ambient air around all of us, and it's even within kind of an in-between realm between the living and the dead, that it's almost like there's an ethereal space just full of essential energy. And it's this interaction with essence that creates magical abilities. A wizard, for example, pulls essence through a medium, which is called a grimoire, and that shapes essence into a spell. A cipher will use another person's soul as the focus for their essence and their magic, and cast abilities related to that. A monk in the world of Eora, they undergo pain in wounds or mortification, and that pain emboldens their soul. It gives them a sort of energy and discipline and focus and strength, and then they can channel that energy into the powers that they use. This is translated in the games by something called wounds and mortification, where as you are playing the game, as your monk character takes damage, they are essentially transforming that pain into essence energy. And then as you take more and more wounds in battle, you can then expend those wounds to perform superhuman abilities. If you are saving them up longer, like you're taking more and more damage, then you can expend them for even cooler abilities or even higher damage dealing abilities. How this works in the lore and the world building is that you can kind of have a little bit of a masochistic character. You can have characters that like to inflict wounds upon themselves, or they look forward to getting punched in the face because it leads to this kind of increase in energy. But besides just a combat effectiveness, there's also, I think, like a mentality that can go with it as well, that as you are increasing your pain and the threshold for pain, you're increasing your ability to understand more about the world, and you can make yourself more mentally and spiritually focused and disciplined and almost higher in that sense. And so you can have these monks like Zawa, the companion from the first Pillars of Eternity game in the White March DLC, who purposely submits himself to pain and humiliation, as well as drug trips, to fuel his spiritual understanding of the world and gain focus and clarity on what things are and what he is doing. And that's just kind of the life he lives. And there's a lot of other monks in this world who would subject themselves to that much pain so that they can have a deeper understanding about the world that they're in. Now, there are monk orders within the game, that is, groups of people that come together and they explore this world of pain and the soul together, and they have different ways of doing it. There's probably some monk orders out there. In fact, I think there is a monk order, I just can't remember the name of it, who undergo like a sort of ritual death, if you will, but not where they actually fully die. They just kind of die a little bit, I guess, but then they are brought back. They're resuscitated. Obviously, not everyone survives, and there's something that is supposed to come from that. There's a monk order that sees if they can use the pain of others to fuel their abilities and their insights within the world. So it's through these different means that these monk orders approach, various ways of exploring the soul and essence and magic and what all this stuff means through the medium of pain. Now, we have this monk order that we're talking about today known as the 1,000 Dreams. And if you have the unique item or weapon called Purgatory, you can read this item description in game, and this tells you most or pretty much all of that you can learn about the 1,000 Dreams monk order. So let's read through this and talk about what we find here. In a monastery overlooking Cold Flow Lake from the foothills of the White March, there once resided a clandestine order of monks known as the 1,000 Dreams. Through a powerful form of pain-induced meditation, these monks were able to walk through their past lives as though they were dreams. Each traversed these memories in ultimate hopes of achieving complete understanding of his or her soul's identity. They believed that after experiencing 1,000 lifetimes, total enlightenment could be attained. So this is just the first paragraph of a few, and already there's a lot to go over. As far as like Cold Flow Lake and the foothills of the White March, these are just geographical locations, which I'm sure you can gather. The White March is actually somewhere that you can visit in the game if you have the White March DLCs, or at least just one of them. And you theoretically would be able to see Cold Flow Lake from the foothills of the White March. Cold Flow Lake, I'm pretty sure I've seen that on the map of the Deerwood, which is the setting for the First Pillars game, but it's not somewhere we ever explore in the game as far as I remember. Or maybe it's the Frozen Lake, whatever. Anyways, regardless, there's a monastery out there for the Thousand Dreams Monk Order. What they believe in is that you can achieve total enlightenment through reliving your past lives in your dreams. So that implies some stuff about the lore that we may already know, especially if you've been listening to the show or you've played enough of the game, and that is that there is a cycle of reincarnation that exists within this world. You die, your soul leaves your body, goes to the beyond where the gods are, comes back after a while, enters into a new body, boom, there. One cycle of the reincarnation cycle gone. It's also called the wheel in this world. But because you harbor a soul in your body that was in a previous body, that means your soul has lived through previous lives. You just don't remember it because those memories were housed in a different body. But they are tangibly still there within the soul that you house yourself. And people in this world have explored different ways of looking into past lives that souls have had. And this is one of the ways that this monk order does it. Animancers would use scientific methods to try to look into past lives, and these Thousand Dreams monk instead use a form of pain-induced meditation, which is an interesting kind of concept. There are different forms of meditation that exist within the world. You have on like one side of the spectrum, well, I guess it's not a spectrum, I don't know why I'm presenting it like this, but yeah, I've heard of the one side of meditation where it's like you're calming yourself, you're trying to empty yourself of all thoughts, you're trying to have no thoughts in your mind, you're just trying to be completely in the moment, like on that side of things. And then there's on the other side, there's this idea of meditation being absolutely the different. It's being intentionally, completely, and only focused on one idea and pushing out anything else that might distract from that idea. Those are two ways that I've heard of and know about meditation, is like the complete emptying of the mind or the complete filling of the mind, but just with one thing. Regardless, having pain-induced meditation would be very tricky. Whether you're trying to empty your mind of everything, but being induced into pain, not really noticing or thinking about that would be very difficult. As well, if you're trying to focus on something, but you're having pain induced into you, it'd be hard to meditate. However, remember, in this world, the pain induction that you would be experiencing while meditating is giving your soul more and more of this energy, because you, as a monk, you have that ability. You fine-tune your body and your skills to be able to kind of transfer pain into this energy, which would allow you to enter into what they call here almost like a dream state. It says that they are able to walk through their lives as though they were dreams, and hence the name of this monk order, the Thousand Dreams. So it doesn't say that explicitly that they are dreaming, but it's that they can experience their past lives as if they were dreaming. And I think the good distinction here is that if you are re-experiencing a past life as the viewer, you might be re-experiencing it in such a way where, I kind of think of one of two ways, where you are fully embodied into the dream, where you actually think you are the person you are until you wake up and realize that it was just a dream. There could be another alternative, though, where you are going through the dream knowing that you are watching a previous memory, right? So there's almost like a full awareness of who you actually are in the real world versus being completely immersed into something in these previous memories where you actually think you're that person in the memory. That's how I kind of see two ways of doing it. And in this one, they are walking through their past lives as if they were dreams. The ultimate hope, of course, of traversing through all of these lifetimes is to achieve a complete understanding of his or her soul's identity. Now, one thing it doesn't talk about here, but is interesting to think about, is how much of their past lives are they walking through. Because it's easy for us to think, oh yeah, they're going to this dream state, and then they're going to some previous memory of a person who, some big important memory that they have from their past life. Or are they trying to literally live through the entire lifetime in these dream states? Because as we all know, we can have dreams that you swear last for days, but they last for mere moments in the real world. And so how much of a person's entire lifetime could you live in the amount of real world time within this dream state? And I think that's kind of the point, is that they're literally trying to go through the entire lifetimes of these past lives that their soul has. And again, the idea and the belief is that after you experience 1,000 lifetimes, you achieve total enlightenment, whatever that means. And that's an interesting thing. Why 1,000? Is it just because it sounds kind of monk-ish? What does total enlightenment mean? And would everyone achieve it at 1,000 lifetimes, or would some get there a little faster if they happen to have a lot of previous lifetimes that had a lot of wisdom in it? Or what if you experienced a person's past lifetime who already did this? Would it just lay over, and so you just have to pick up where they left off? That's actually kind of an interesting idea. If you're into tabletop role-playing, perhaps someone's trying to do something like that. So play around with that idea a little bit. Someone trying to jump off a previous life's work of doing this total enlightenment, if someone could do such a thing. So the lore of this continues on by talking about a specific person, and I'm going to butcher the name, but I'm just going to call them Ri Golan, and so we'll go through. Greatest of their sect was Ri Golan, who had an ancient soul and was said to have walked more lifetimes than any other. But when she came to the end of all of her lifetimes and found there was no more to experience, it became clear that she would never come to know herself completely, for there was simply not enough to learn from. So this is a little interesting introduction here. You have this person, Ri Golan, and that name sounds very Glonfathan to me. It might not be. In this world, there's a lot of different factions and nations and cultural identities. The Glonfathans are a tribe of people, or groups of tribes of people, that were native to the area that the Deerwood, which is the setting for the first game, that's kind of their native homeland, if you will. Whereas the Deerwood was not actually its name. That's the colonial name for the area when the Empire of Adir came over. But that's besides what we're talking about. I just say Ri Golan sounds like one of them, a tribal name from that area. I could be completely wrong. It also sounds Gwithin, and those people died out a long time ago, so regardless. But greatest of their sect of the Thousand Dreams was this person named Ri Golan, who had an ancient soul. So it is known that this person, she had a very old soul. It has lived for a very long time. Which says something, right? Because souls have strengths. Not everyone's soul is made equal. Every time a soul goes through the cycle of reincarnation, it undergoes fracturing, it undergoes entropy, it undergoes erosion, and it gets weaker and weaker as time goes on. And so to have an ancient soul means your soul's very strong. It means it's survived the wheel without as much wear and tear as perhaps other people. And she has said to walk more lifetimes than anyone else. But she came to the end of all her lifetimes and found there was nothing else to experience. And she still had not, this kind of implied, even though it doesn't say it, it sounds like she did not achieve her 1,000 lifetimes. Now, this is interesting to a lore nerd like me and perhaps some people out there listening, because this kind of implies, not that it's much of a stretch, I guess, but it implies that there are less than 1,000 lifetimes, potentially anyways, from the beginning of people's souls. Now, that depends. We haven't dove into the discussion much in this world of, are new souls made all the time? Like, is there someone out there who had a brand new soul and it didn't have any past lives? Or were all the souls made all at the same time, or did they come out in a flow when they were first created and all that kind of thing? So the fact that this person has a soul that is the most ancient in this sect, and it stretches back all the way, does her soul stretch out back to the beginning of when souls were introduced? Or were there thousands of generations before that when there were still souls? We don't really know the answer to that question, but it does say that there, at the very least, with this person's ancient soul, that it seems that less than 1,000 lifetimes ago, there were some new souls being made. And I do think that matters and counts for things. There is a little bit of discussion within the game about the ages of souls, if I remember correctly, but that's not what we're here to talk about today, so I'm not going to dive into a different tangent. I might have to replay the game, actually, to find out where some of that information is. Unless any of you remember any of those discussions in game, send me a heads up, worldofeora@gmail.com. Any help I can get in research saves a lot of time, so I'd appreciate it. But that's besides the point. So it became clear to Ri Golan that she is not going to be able to achieve this enlightenment because she can't get to 1,000 lifetimes. She can't know herself completely. But as we go into this next paragraph, we learn something kind of about her. Unable to accept this fate after her endless trials, Ri Golan sought a way to take the experience of others for her own, that she might reach 1,000 lifetimes yet. She channeled her unquenchable hunger into her favorite sword, and it became an instrument of her will, With it, she claimed many lives in the surrounding area. Each drop of blood on her blade was a new experience, each killing blow a new lifetime for her to claim. When the rest of the Thousand Dreams came to learn of her actions, they banded together and confronted Rigolan upon her return to the temple. In the end, amid a crowd of slain monks, she did indeed come to understand her soul, and it is said that among the many experiences contained in the blade are those of Rigolan herself. Now, this part is always interesting to read, not because of the violence and bloodshed. I mean, maybe if that's what you're into, then I don't want to yuck anyone's yum. But then again, I also don't want to encourage violence. But whatever. This part I always find interesting because it talks about the nature of essence and how essence works in this world. And I've done episodes on this before where an item within the world can have almost like an essence transference is how I think about it. That's not how the game presents it. Where a person's soul, their essence, can kind of seep into an item that is very important to them. And almost like that item soaks in some memories and consciousness of that person, which is why, at least I theorize, why a lot of these unique weapons and armor have people's stories within them, or why unique weapons and armor can even have magical enchantments in the first place, because these, what would normally be considered mundane objects, have been infused with essence. Now, obviously, people can maybe do this in a scientific way. You can take a sword and then take some essence in a laboratory and kind of put it into the sword. So now the sword becomes a sword of +1, or it has lightning attacks, or it grants healing or something like that. But there is also this idea that the person's soul who owns the weapon, the wielder of the sword, can have some of their soul, if you will, bleed into the sword, transfer into the sword because it is one of their dear possessions and it spends a lot of time together. And they spend a lot of time together when that person is wielding magic or they are channeling superhuman abilities through their interaction with essence, right? So there's almost this idea that their weapons and armor are soaking this stuff up. And this is kind of seen here. We see a consistency with that. Where Rigolan, she was like, I'm not willing to, I've already spent my entire life exploring my past lives. I'm not going to just give up now. So she takes her sword, specifically her favorite sword, which I think, again, kind of encourages what I was talking about, and she channeled her unquenchable hunger into that sword, and it became an instrument of her will. And so you have this sword and this idea that she can channel her unquenchable hunger, which would be a part of her soul. Yes, it is a part of her body, but her body and soul are interconnected. They are entwined. They are essentially one thing. So she can, in a sense, she can take that unquenchable hunger that she has, and it's in her soul, and she can transfer it into the sword. And so the sword is now infused with some of her essence. Or if there was essence in the sword, it has been infused with the flavor of her unquenchable hunger within her soul. However it works mechanically, we don't know. And it became an instrument of her will. And I think it's just flavor text for what she does, which is claiming the lives of many people in the surrounding area. And now this idea pulls even more further when it says each drop of blood on her blade was a new experience, each killing blow a new lifetime. And there's something about these moments of violence and bloodshed that allows this monk, Rigolan, to experience other people's lifetimes, which is the souls that they have, their essence, which houses the memories of lifetimes from their past lives. There's something about engaging in that violence and spilling blood that allowed Rigolan to experience their lifetimes. And I like how it specifically says here, each drop of blood was a new experience, but not their whole lifetime. But each killing blow, which is when she actually takes the life, was a new lifetime for her to claim. And so there's this obvious ratio in terms of how much blood you spill from a person determines how much of their soul that you can peer into. And it seems that here she is able to actually experience the entire lifetime of one of her victims, essentially, if she performs a killing blow on them. And so what's going on there? Is it because when you perform a killing blow, that is when the soul decouples from the body? And so now Rigolan is able to, since her essence and their essence are kind of both in a hot state, perhaps they can meld better. I'm kind of bringing temperature and thermodynamics into it, but trying to understand this stuff that isn't real in the first place. And if it was, we wouldn't be able to touch it or see it because it's ephemeral. Either way, she killed a lot of people with this sword and experienced their lifetimes whenever she performed a killing blow. Now, I don't know how close she was to reaching 1,000 lifetimes. She would have had to go out there and kill a lot of people, I imagine. I don't know. Maybe she was at 995, and she's like, okay, like, I'm so close. I'm not going to let this stop me, I could almost see that being a motivation. Like, if you hit 500 and you didn't get to the end, maybe you'd be like, shoot, well, I'm half enlightened anyways. Like, killing 500 people seems like a pretty big task and also awful, I don't think you should do that. But hey, this is all fantasy, right? Now, of course, the Temple of 1,000 Dreams, the monk order of the 1,000 Dreams, they come to learn about this, and they're not really that pleased. They confront her in the courtyard, and it ends with them all being slain. So whoever this Regolon person is, she very clearly is quite adept at swordplay, which, interestingly, I suppose she could have learned from one of her past lives. It doesn't say whether or not she was good with swords beforehand, but if you're truly experiencing a lot of these past lives, there is probably some sort of skills that you could learn along the way. And I guess it also makes sense when you're talking about this person who has seen the most lifetimes more than anyone else, and they are this unstoppable force. Like, nobody could take her down in these surrounding villages, and all of these monks put together couldn't take her down. Well, that's probably because she had all the power and energy and skill and memories of the people that she had the memories of, including herself, to go off of. So that implies something about the world and how its essence and memories and skills work as well, without explicitly saying it. In the end, it says she was able to come to understand her soul, and that among the many experiences contained within the blade are those of Regolon herself. And so you, now as the Watcher character in Pillars of Eternity, you can get this sword, Purgatory, or saber, I guess, technically speaking, and it has some of Regolon's experiences in there. Now, obviously not all of them, not the entire enlightened experience is in this one sword, but there is some of Regolon's experience within the sword itself, because again, it would be getting suffused with her essence and other people's essence as it was being engaged in all this different violence and bloodshed. And this is what gives the sword its mechanical traits in the game and all that, which I don't have in front of me, but that's not lore related, so we're not talking about it. But that's how the sword is better than just a normal sword, a normal saber, sorry. The ending paragraph here just says, the blade itself is a simple saber with worn leather grip and an inset ebony hilt. Becomes hot to the touch when the wielder's foes are vanquished. That much, I think, is a little bit more gamey, like it gives you a description of it. The very ending statement there, though, when you vanquish a foe, the sword becomes hot. If some of Regolon's soul is inside the sword, or the sword has kind of infused itself with some of Regolon's flavor of her soul, then there would be this kind of like excitement, as you can see, that comes from someone being slain, because every time that Regolon would have slain someone, there would have been some level of excitement that she would have experienced because, oh, that's another lifetime I can get. And so her soul would almost be hot and passionate within her. And so it makes sense that this blade would also kind of grow a little hot to the touch as well whenever someone is vanquished, because it's almost been conditioned to repeat the same pattern that its previous wielder had as well. And that's, I don't know, I find this kind of stuff very interesting because it explains more about how essence works without actually explaining it in a mechanical way. Like, it doesn't just say, this is how it works. And we kind of infer this stuff through the flavor of living within this world and talking about stuff like this. And this is why this podcast exists, for me personally anyways. What started out as just like a pet project for something to do during COVID, and because I wanted to really get into podcasting, I started this project. And as it moved more into something people wanted to hear, I had to kind of transform what my reasons were for it. And really, really diving into a lot of this stuff to understand how the world works and make these theories. I don't know. This is something that excites me, and I know it excites a lot of others as well. So I have a question for anyone that has been listening. What are your thoughts on this? Like, how do you view the way that essence works in this world? Because it doesn't explicitly tell you everything, which I love, less is more, that whole thing. Show, don't tell. And Obsidian have been known for making high quality writing, and especially in Pillars of Eternity, it was one of the things that people praised about it. But as a result, there can be a lot of different competing theories on how things work that we can take with things that we know for sure are canon, and we can come up with these theories on how something works. I've always wanted to get in a good discussion with other people about how teleportation might work within this world, but that's a different topic for a different day, even though I have talked about it. Now, I have talked about Thousand Dreams before in this podcast series when I was doing my monk episode, I believe, but I did not go into a deep dive like this. If you did enjoy going into a deep dive on these kind of niche topics within this niche, podcast in the first place, let me know. But I guess I'm getting into episode closing territory, so let's just jump right into that.
If you find your trail has run cold, come to me with whatever you have. There is much I may be able to do for you.
Yeah, so if you like today's episode or you have a comment, question, concern, etc., please send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com. I am very genuine when I say I love having conversations with people. There are a number of you that I keep up with personally just because I really enjoy talking, and there's also been some really interesting questions that have actually created episodes of their own. So I always love hearing topic requests and stuff like that as well, or even corrections where I can learn a little bit more about the world because maybe I missed something. I might be pretty steeped within the lore, but that doesn't mean I don't make mistakes. There are actually way more people than me who know way more about this world than I do. I just happen to be talking about it on the microphone. But if you have any answers to the questions I brought up about how you think Essence might work within this world, or how you understand it, like what things help you understand it, send me an email, worldofeora@gmail.com. Look forward to hearing from some of you. If you want to keep up with the show, you can do so on Twitter @worldofeora. I don't really post much other than when a recent episode comes out, or if something happens and I'm not going to be able to release an episode, I'll usually post that information on Twitter itself. But it's just a way to engage if that's the way you like to. However, if you would like to support the show directly, there are a couple ways you can do so. One, you can go to ko.com. Nope. Sorry, I almost got the URL wrong. ko-fi.com/worldofeora. Say that again just because I messed it up. ko-fi.com/worldofeora. That's a way that you can directly support the show. I don't expect anyone listening to actually do it, not because I don't think it's worth supporting, but because it's just not an expectation I have. I was convinced by a number of people that it was a good option for those who like to support the show, and there are a number of people who like to support this show regularly, and I thank you guys for your support. I really do. It's fantastic. It helps me do more with the show, and it also lets me know that this show is valuable to some people. Now, it is just there as a way for people who get value themselves from supporting things that they like. So if that is something that is important to you, feel free to just toss $5 to it. As long as I get $5 a month, I get my wife a coffee because she gives me the time to do this. The rest of it just sits in a PayPal account in case the podcast needs something, or if you want me to use it for a good cause, then feel free to make that request. If, however, you want to support the show not through any monetary way for whatever reason, you can engage with the platform that you're on, whether that is on Spotify by, commenting on the show, or if I have a poll, you can answer that. If you're on iTunes, I believe they still let you do reviews and ratings. Whatever your podcast platform allows for you to do with engagement, if you would just take a quick moment and listening to this right now and engage on that platform, it helps the algorithm of those platforms know that this is a show worth engaging with, and it'll get recommended to other people who listen to shows that you happen to like, and that'll help other people reach it and spread even more. I might not be trying to make a living out of this, but I'd like to get it in the hands of as many people as I can. As for what I have been playing lately, I have been playing the game of Sable, which came out a few years ago at this point, I believe, and I've been having a great experience. When I played it the first time it came out, I knew it was something I wanted to experience, but I was just not in the headspace for a slow, freeform, meditative, sandboxy experience like Sable. I was never ready for it. And the few times that I was ready or in that headspace, I had other games on the horizon that I didn't want to, intersect with each other. But I have a big space right now where I'm not really looking forward to any particular game for quite a while. Just looking forward to Avowed's anniversary update, honestly. And I've been playing a bunch of small games, and I was in the mood for Sable. And honestly, it's been a great experience. There's a fan of the show that whose blog I subscribe to, and we talk a lot on Discord, although I haven't reached out as much lately, so maybe I should do that. That's a game that he loves, and being able to talk to him about this game and the things that I have learned about myself just from playing that game has been really interesting. And that's something I have gained a lot of value from with this game of Sable. Because you're playing this character who leaves her desert home and family and people that she knows and loves to go on essentially a pilgrimage called the Gliding. It goes out into the world by herself at this young age to discover who she is in the world and where her place is and where she belongs. performing tasks for a bunch of various people that she meets, things that she does find interesting or doesn't find interesting. But of course, you, the player character, are the person doing all that decision making. And it was just interesting to like reflect back on it as the player, thinking that like I am the person going on the gliding. Like this isn't Sable making the decision. There's no narrative thing that I'm experiencing that someone else wrote. I am actually the person deciding what Sable does. For example, there was the chance to engage in like desert fishing, which sounds really cool, but I'm like, I don't care about that. I don't want to play that kind of a game, so I'm not going to do it. And I've never done anything with it. And that was very interesting because from the game's perspective of this girl going on her gliding to discover who she is, it's almost as if this character has learned, like, I don't enjoy doing these things for these reasons. And you can kind of reflect that upon yourself in the real world of, well, why don't you enjoy the fishing mechanic or the fishing minigame within this game? Like, what about it do you not like? And that's an interesting thing to sit back and think about. Like, yeah, you're just learning like what kind of stuff you like in video games. It's not like a life-changing thing like a gliding, but it does tell you something about yourself, right? And as you explore the game a little bit more, you learn more things about yourself. I quickly discovered that I really like finding new spots on the map, but I don't have this drive to explore every corner of the map. I also learned that once the end of the game is within sight, I lose a lot of my motivation to keep on playing. And a lot of these questions pop up in my head of like, why is that? Like, why don't I explore every nook and cranny? Or why is it when I know I can finish a game right away that I lose the motivation to continue playing the side content? And there's some interesting questions that not only infer about how I act with video games, but can also maybe infer about how I act with other projects, including where I work and within my family. Now, I'm not trying to say that the game of Sable has changed my life. It's just interesting that a game can make you think that much about something. And even just rambling about it here, it makes me stop and think I want to kind of journal some of this out and see if I can eke out any sort of lessons from that. So yeah, Sable, great game, super meditative. Very low mechanics. You're just flying from place to place, jumping around, collecting items, and seeing what you enjoy. I definitely recommend giving it a shot if it's within your wheelhouse, but it's not going to be for everybody. That's it. I'm not going to tell you anything else I'm working on because that went for a while. Mostly just tabletop role-playing stuff. Looking forward to playing the new campaign for my Fallout tabletop game this evening as the GM. But that's everything for today, everyone. Thanks for listening to today's episode of World of Eora. I've been your host, Eric, aka Gingerino, and I'll see you guys next time.